At the core of feminist criticism of games is the question, does this game treat women as equals to men? This might seem like a simple question, but it's complicated in video games by the fact that video game protagonists tend to be physically superior heroes and heroines of some sort, meaning they're inherently special. Equality, therefore, becomes a subjective weighing of various elements of the fictional world surrounding the playable character, interpreted through the lens of whatever bias the analyst brings to the table. Obviously, good analysis of any kind attempts to minimize artificial bias. However, postmodern intersectional analysis sometimes puts too much emphasis on emotional reactions to a work, and often misidentifies unintended consequence of a game design flaw as a deliberate act of subjugating women. Sure, most game designers are men who will never have any idea what it's like to be a woman, but great female characters have been created anyway. We all have our preconceptions when analyzing this stuff. When I was a kid, I thought that Samus in a bathing suit was taunting players who assumed she was male. I don't really get the idea of a woman made of squares being all that legitimately sexually appealing. But I've seen YouTube videos of subsequent games that show me that the ongoing tradition of the bikini reveal takes on a new meaning for players who have aged physically, but not mentally. Things like this and the undeniable fact that Princess Daphne from Dragon's Lair was inspired by old Playboy magazine images brings the feminist sex wars into gaming. Every analyst has to determine for themselves whether or not they believe that pornography is inherently harmful. An anti-pornography analyst is going to get very different results than a sex-positive one. There is no proof that pornography actually causes social harm, and it's far from a new invention, but some analysts still follow Andrea Dworkin in determining that all depictions of sex and sexuality in media somehow oppress women. Yay! I'm pretty sure the intent in those games wasn't to do anything to women. I think the idea was more to set up various types of bait to suck quarters out of the pockets of teenage boys. Is that exploitative? Sure, but not in the way it's being portrayed. Sexual content in early video games was all about parting a fool from his money. I doubt it works as well now, since arcades made way for consoles and free porn is so easy to get on the internet. Judging modern video games based on content made 30 years ago is a waste of time. Culture's changed a great deal since the 1980s. I mean, have you seen the Gem and the Holograms remake movie? Seriously, what is this bullshit? There is a lingering puritanical idea that women don't naturally enjoy sex and are therefore the default sexual gatekeepers in society, and we see a surprising amount of that crop up in so-called feminist analysis of video games. I can't help but think that some people have been so indoctrinated Mass Effect style by the idea that inside every man is a potential rapist, that the message has been lost that the rescue the princess narratives in video games have at least as much to do with seeking approval from women as they do with any male sexual conquest. My personal opinion is that gamers motivated by sexual conquest are a fairly small part of the gaming community, because it's very rare that you actually see sex acts in video games. Is there some ego stroking and possibly stroking of other things going on in games? Yeah, but I think the real thrill is the violation of cultural taboos, not any desire to oppress women. That being said, some of the social taboos being broken are the very ones protecting women's dignity. And there are some assholes out there who are legitimate misogynists. Not Darth Vader, he was set up here. The problem in gaming right now is that the bar is set so low in terms of accusations of sexism that we're having trouble rooting out the people who are real problems. Everyone who misspeaks on a single point these days is labeled misogynist or transphobic or some other horrible negative judgment of their entire character. This has led some people who aren't bad people to declare themselves anti-feminists. The ironic thing about this is that one of the things that traditional anti-feminism opposes is feminism's promotion of casual sex. Without feminism, we wouldn't have Grand Theft Auto. It's true. Mind blown. In the video game community, we do have issues with some idiots using threats of sexual violence as weapons to silence women they disagree with. Men get threats as well, yeah, but they're less likely to be of a sexual nature. These idiots who use sexuality as a weapon only have these weapons because society has given them to them. Do we think a man is somehow less good because a woman flashes her boobs at them? No. So why do we see a man whacking off to a picture of a woman as some sort of shaming tactic? It's a game of hit the buzzer, get offended. Meanwhile, when women use our still taboo sexuality, it's treated as a negative. Bayonetta is perpetually used as a shorthand for whatever perceived ills in the video game industry people feel like picking on at a given time. Meanwhile, in a BioWare game, if that taboo sexuality is same-sex sexuality, men can be bare-ass naked. But during the same period of time, they did away with any woman with large breasts or promiscuous sexual habits, only to put Isabella back in via DLC. So even in the most progressive companies, female sexuality is still held up to far more moralizing than male sexuality by the very feminist critics who claim to advocate for women. We've hit a point in video game feminism where the analysis is conflicting with itself. You can't complain about the depiction of women as damsels in distress and then claim that when those women show affection to men who rescue them, they're doing it against their will. That's making the rescue of these damsels in distress part of their abuse. People are understandably tuning out regarding that. Besides, this idea that it's a better story when a woman is able to save herself, there's some privilege talking there. Men and women who are rape survivors were abused against their will, not because they failed to stop it. The idea that they should have been able to save themselves contributes to victim blaming. There's a strong resentment in the video game community for this sort of analysis because gamers are being stigmatized as deviants while Beyonce, an open feminist, contributed a song to the soundtrack for 50 Shades of Grey. I get it, guys. I get why you're pissed. True egalitarian feminist analysis sees healthy male and female sex drives as valid and diverse. It accepts the fact that the vast majority of the consumers of games don't fantasize about raping women even if they enjoy porn. The complaints of past decades about women being kidnapped, maimed, and murdered to advance the plots of male heroes weren't focused on the fact that it ever happened, but on how frequently it happened. But these days, any instance of a damsel in distress or a woman in refrigerator is seen as some sort of attack on all women. To me, this is a mixed message. Do we want the support of men recognizing that there are still unique challenges facing women? Or do we want men to just get off the mic and let us do it ourselves? We need to answer this question fast because the shitlord factor has hit critical mass. There are some legitimate sexists impacting video games right now. Trust me, I run into them. They're never where you expect them to be, and they're usually protected because they make someone money. Easy targets are being attacked right now. The harder ones are protected by contracts, NDAs, and the basic desire to keep having a job. I think there's also a fear of the audience, which makes some feminist critics more aggressive than we really need to be, because we're trying to put on a brave face while we're really scared of what's coming. We've been trained to be afraid of words, after all, and some of us fight this training better than others. Every other type of thought leader, however, needs to be seen as authentic, and that means being tested in the public sphere. The thing is, both left and right-wing radicals think that an openly aggressive woman is bad. So guess who tends to get attacked from both sides? Welcome to my life. That's why I started cosplaying femme fatale characters. They helped me have some self-esteem when every social cue around me was saying I was inherently bad for body parts that would require surgery to remove. The idea that society's current solution to body shaming is for me to cut off my breasts simply because they offend other people is bullshit. Similarly, prostitution and pornography have existed for as long as humankind has existed, and that's not going away. I don't think people should criticize these industries unless they've actually engaged with these industries. On modern porn sets, women can absolutely refuse to have sex with a man they don't find appealing. I've seen it happen. So this idea that porn promotes the idea that women are property of men is just not true. At one point, the reality of porn was different, but the internet democratized things so much that porn has changed. It's now a type of business a woman can run herself and make a tidy living doing it. What I don't get is how some feminist critics feel entitled to comment on women who do jobs involving nudity when they've never done it themselves. I have, and I have the pictures that perverts have ejaculated on to prove it. What I've learned from these experiences is that, first, some men seem extremely dehydrated. Secondly, it hasn't been gamers who have slut-shamed me for the existence of these photos. It's been political operatives from fringe activist groups, including hardline conservatives, so-called men's rights activists, Marxists, sex-negative feminists, and of course, internet trolls. Does this mean there aren't other factors at play beyond appearance regarding gender portrayals? No, of course not. But we seem to get so stuck on appearance that we don't dig deeper. Feminist analysis of video games is failing to capture many hearts and minds because it's compounding the negative stereotypes associated with male sexuality while attempting to educate people away from the stereotypes affecting women. In doing this, it strips the issue of larger contexts and just leads people to reject the material because they feel rejected by the material. And now we're adding the issues of sexual orientation and trans people to the mix without understanding the fundamentals of identity-based analysis in the first place. And we wonder why we have such a mess. So the big question is, how do we clean up this mess? And I didn't know what graphic to use here, so I just found an insane cat ready to shred a dude's hand, because it somehow seemed appropriate. Okay, so how do we do this? Okay, first, stop demonizing consensual sex. This includes non-trafficked sex workers. Rape is not an act of sex. Rape is an act of violence. Give women the power to say yes, and it strengthens our ability to say no. Second, stop slut-shaming. Raising awareness that clothing is not consent is supposed to be the purpose of the various slut walks, but the activist wing of video game social justice inverts that paradigm when it demands so-called normal women in modest dress. Third, focus on how games handle sex, sexuality, and rape, not whether or not they exist in the game at all. An act of violence against a woman in a game doesn't make the game a bad game, especially if male characters are dropping dead left and right too. Fourth, separate things that are in poor taste from things that are actually harmful. If something's in poor taste, product labeling solves the problem. It allows players to avoid it if they choose. If something is harmful, it's usually because it can't be avoided, like some of the really nasty things people do to others over Xbox Live. These behaviors actually need to be curtailed. And the mute button isn't enough because the mute button only gets used after someone has had a bad experience. Actions need to be taken to create a more welcoming community the way League of Legends did. Fifth and final point for today, recognize that gaming didn't create sexism. Gaming borrows cultural touchpoints which may have sexist elements. Blaming gaming for sexism is like blaming a banana because someone slipped on a peel. A lot of the elements of games that come across as inherently sexist are usually just lazy, fearful, or pandering design choices. Very few developers set out to make games that deliberately offend their audience. So placing a unique focus on games and gamers as a source of society's sexism naturally led to a revolt because gamers know it's not true. Hopefully you found this examination thought-provoking. I'm hoping that gamers can work together to create a better dialogue surrounding these issues that overcomes the screaming at each other we're stuck with now. By doing so, we'll serve two purposes: stop the demonization of gamers and stop feminism from being a cross between a curse word and a punchline. This is our community. We can make it what we want it to be, without opportunistic outsiders who don't understand games demanding that we admit we're bad people. I'm a woman. I'm a gamer. Why is that still such a big, stupid deal?